Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Yvonne Epe. I'm Communications Manager for Propcom Mai-karfi. Thank you for joining our webinar today, leveraging ICT to access agricultural extension and mechanization services. This webinar is the second in a series of webinars Propcom is hosting to share experiences implementing in Northern Nigeria. In the first webinar, we shared our approach to climate smart agriculture. If you missed that webinar, you can find the recording and slides on our website, and I will be sharing the link in the chat box. Today, we'll focus on how Propcom Mai-karfi has used technology to improve access, to expand rural farmers' access to mechanization and extension services. And we have two speakers who will be presenting today. First is Blessing Allen-Adebayo. She's a technical lead on our agricultural extension intervention. And Abeti Ayu, she leads our mechanization intervention. While we're waiting for more people to join, I need to say that if you're having issues hearing or seeing, please use the chat box to send any of the challenges you're having. Now, the webinar will start off with a brief overview of Propcom Mai-karfi, and then you'll move to the presentations proper, starting with the extension and then agricultural mechanization, and then we'll round up with lessons learned. The second half of our webinar today will be the Q&A session, where that's the question and answer section, where we'll address all your questions. So you're please encouraged to post as many questions as the webinar progresses. I'd like to add that in the webinar today, we have some of our partners who worked with us on our extension and mechanization interventions. They will be able to contribute to the conversation during the question and answer session if necessary. We also have with us Ogene Obo-Bebo, Propcom's deputy team leader. She will be taking us through an overview of Propcom Mai-karfi, and then she'll also hang around and contribute to the conversation during the question and answer session. The question and answer feature is located where all your controls are, usually at the bottom of your screen. So please use it judiciously to post as many questions as you have. Right, so I'm going to hand over to Ovo now. And thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I welcome you once again to the second of our series of virtual dissemination of what Propcom has done over the last 9 years. Just to give you some insight on who we are a market-based program that has been focused on using the market systems development approach to promote access to services and commodities, essentially promoting proper opportunities in the commodities and service markets. And we've been here for donkey years. 9 years is a long time. In the first 6 years of the program, we were covering the entire Northern Nigeria. And in the last 3 years, starting from 2018, our focus have been in the 6 northeastern states, the conflict-affected region, and 3 of the northwestern states. And the focus really in these 3 years of its extension is really looking at facilitating economic recovery in the conflict-affected region, trying to help households build resilience, not just to conflict as a shock, but also to climate-related events. But we also wanted to continue to consolidate and build systems, inclusive market systems within the region, whilst taking into account some of the key nuances and context and issues around inclusion, looking at women's economic empowerment and people living with disability. Part of what we have, in fact, we've worked in a number of commodities chain and sectors, even spanning into health. But within the agricultural sector, we've essentially worked in 6 main markets with multiple interventions in each of those markets, as you would see. We've been in inputs, trying to facilitate access to input, looking at the key barriers to inputs and building systems to be able to respond to the needs of smallholders in the region. Of course, agricultural mechanization, offtake, warehousing, the livestock sector, looking at facilitating access to finance as a key cross-cutting issues, and then really strengthening the work we do around climate smart agriculture. In the last 3 years, within the extension phase of the program, we've begun to look at ways of leveraging technology. We already saw lots of opportunities, trying to facilitate access to certain types of inputs and services using SMS-based delivery of information, just essentially trying to connect value chain actors. And we began the first indigenous private sector-led extension in Nigeria, working with an ag tech company. And so alas, when the pandemic set in, it wasn't difficult for us to just transition into technology-based delivery of our 19 projects, across these 6 markets, working with our partners, both private sector players, as well as public sector actors. We would just want to share two of our very interesting, examples and experience in mechanization and in tractors, showing how we essentially minimized supply chain disruption during the COVID and how we built on some of the learnings that we've gathered in the last 3 years to strengthen the work we're doing in extension, as well as just driving access to mechanization services. I will pass it now on to Blessing. Blessing is going to tell us a little more on how we pushed extension, particularly not really limited to the COVID period, but looking at how we've tried to find some sustainable way to driving access to extension in, across the states where we're working, as well as, working with radio and ag tech companies. Blessing, over to you.
Thank you very much, Oval. Farmers need real-time access and connection to fields, mechanization, all other facilities and services that make them profitable. However, these services are not available. They are not available to farmers. The ratio of extension workers to farmers are 1 to 1,000 extension services. It means that one extension service worker has to provide services to 10,000 workers. This is not sustainable, and this doesn't provide them the kind of service they need. The global recommended average usually is 1 to 800 extension workers. So okay, so thank you. So I will just share. Okay, I'm not slides moving. Well, let me just go ahead and when the slides just walk you through.
Okay, hold on, Blessing. Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. Just bear with me while I share my slides.
So, Yvonne, are you able to share my slides?
Yes, please go on. Go on, Blessing. I will manage.
Thank you. So I was just saying, thank you very much, Yvonne. I was just saying that farmers need connection to the right kinds of information that make them profitable. And this information is not available because there are few extension workers. COVID, some of the factors that now is more difficult to exacerbated the issue was one, COVID. COVID exposed all of the issues in our supply chain. It disrupted supply and access. And when insurgents in the Northeast, 1.2 million people are displaced. These places where displacement have happened, the markets are thin and services aren't really available to farmers in those regions. While many farmers are disadvantaged and do not have access to extension, women are further affected because of cultural issues that prevents them from speaking with strangers outside of their homes. For us to respond to extension, the issues had to be able to surmount both physical, geographical, and gender issues. So what were the opportunities to address this? We saw ICT, technology. First one was radio. 85% of households listen to radio. As of 2018, penetration reached 84%. 160 people have access to feature phones in their hands. young people have smartphones. So there was the influx of smartphones, apps, platforms where people can leverage agricultural technology and even invest in the sector. So these were the opportunities we saw. So starting with radio, I'm going to tell you what we did with radio phones. So leveraging to respond to the issues of extension, a few things had to change. A few things had to change about the way they were implementing their program. They already had agricultural way. However, these programs were not targeted. They did not set any sect of farmers. They just showed their program, played their program, add them randomly. Also had no way of collecting the or from their target audience. And because they had not done, they do not have a system to collect feedback, their knowledge of what exactly farmers needed and what farmers want is very poor. They could not reach and design programs for their target audience. And with the entire disconnect in the system, they definitely were not generating revenue because there was no sponsorship for this program. So going forward, what did we do to respond to some of that they have, and how did the change began to happen? We realized that this change was a mindset change. They needed to change in their mindset. We partnered with Farm Radio International in a coaching relation with radio stations. They injected technology, research, coaching into the radio stations, and things began to change with them. The radio stations started to change how they designed their programs. So for instance, they used to share recorded program, like I mentioned earlier. Record program meant that it was a one-way communication. We just send the information to farmers, and farmers have no way of giving them a feedback to understand this. I'm also going to explain to you that they now adopted a method to get feedback from the farmers. And one of those methods was the Utilization app and the calling lines. This presentation will show you further details on how this changed the paradigm and dynamics of things. They now also changed their calendar. They changed the program to match the agricultural calendar in order to provide relevant information to farmers. And as a result of their mindset change, they're now able to profile the target, their customers, and get sponsorship. Now let me take you to, I'll be sharing one example of the radio stations in Bauchi. Anyway, we worked with 3 radio stations in Bauchi and Gombe. So this interesting case study happened in Bauchi. In 2019, their program design was random. You know, they would just pick any topic and speak to anyone. So for instance, they would talk about maize today, talk about yam tomorrow, talk about tomato the next week. And there was no target, and it was just random. They had recorded programs that they shared to farmers without getting any feedback to understand what the farmers were receiving and what was going right. It was aired once a week, and they definitely had no sponsorship. So in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, this intervention happened, and they began to design their program to respond to the pressing issues of the farmers who had been disconnected from their usual supply systems. So they did a survey, a brief survey that showed them that the majority of their users and subscribers were rice farmers. So they now tailored and designed their programs for farmers, season-specific programs for rice farmers. What that means is that during planting season, they will be sharing information on planting. During harvesting season, they will share information on harvesting. They also adopted a method where farmers could call in. So it changed from being a recorded program to a live program. And the live program was very interesting. They invited agricultural experts from the Agricultural Technology University and other agri-academic experts who farmers could call and ask questions. The program was so interesting that they had to increase it to 45 minutes, and it now aired twice a week. So in case a farmer missed the first episode, to listen to the other episode in the same week. Definitely, from the way things turned out, advertisements began to blossom. You know, people began to advertise, people began to sponsor. They had 8 sponsors for the program. And you know that right now, because they were using Utilization, they can now get feedback from their farmers. So rice farmers were able to get information that the gap that they received from the radio program was able to increase their yield. What exactly did they receive that was different? They now received access to good agronomic practices, inputs, land preparation information that helped them get pests and diseases. They were also connected to all the last mile agents that would normally not be easy for them to access. They had phone numbers of last mile agents. So moving on to the next slide to show you exactly how some of these things happen. Okay, thank you so much. So like I was saying, so for instance, during the in June 2020, in the middle of COVID, the land preparation mechanization companies were advertising mechanization on the radio stations. We are reaching out to the farmers saying that we have mechanization equipment for land preparation in here, there, and there. And this created leads for the radio stations to link farmers to mechanization agents during June and sometime July. For maintenance, the input companies were advertising their herbicides, their fertilizers, and all the other products, sharing phone numbers, locations, and address of where their suppliers were. And farmers who listened were able to get this contact while they got the contact to reach their suppliers and were able to use of extension right in the middle of COVID. And of course, by September, farmers were not concerned about where to sell their product because they could just listen to the radio, get information on best commodity pricing and where the best markets were to supply their goods. So at the end of the whole intervention, at the end of pilot, like I mentioned, we worked with three radio stations. Okay, this slide shows you again about how the feedback works. So while during the programs, farmers were able to share their information with simple polls, respond to different questions. How often do you weed your farm? So get the understanding of what was going on with farmers. This understanding was fed back into the radio design, and the radio station was able to design programs that responded accurately to the needs of farmers. Now going forward to the results that we had from the pilot. So we worked with three radio stations, GoTel Radio, Progress FM, and Globe FM. And these radio stations cover parts of the Northeast and the Northwest: Adamawa, Gombe, Bauchi, Borno, Yobe, Kaduna, Kano, and the rest of them. All of these radio stations were able to reach an average of 3 million farmers in the middle of COVID. Means that 3 million farmers who were planting rice, maize, tomato, granite were able to get good information on good agronomic practices, inputs, markets, and climate smart practices. And at the end of the 6 months pilot, we had 13 new sponsors paying for the program. So this was how we used radio. How did we use mobile phones? For us to use mobile phones, we needed to partner with an ag tech company. We needed an ag tech company that was willing to invest in infrastructure and willing to test the model, it out, and commercialize digital agricultural extension program. But what was the issue? The the ag tech company would need to get information about the market, and they would need to understand the needs of the market. Since Propcom had been in this system for several years, we're able to support and work with them to help them understand the market, the system's needs, and how they'll be able to understand the paying farmers and who the users would be. Now, moving on to the next slide, I'll show you what the Farm Innovation partner did. So Farm Innovation created two products, Farm Aid and VetWiz. And Farm Aid is a digital product that helps farmers and market actors connect in a way that gives farmers access to extension and gives market actors access to the farmers that need to buy and pay for their services. While VetWiz is a mobile app that is used by livestock extension workers who are animal health workers who download this app and provide basic treatment and vaccination for them. I'll tell you why this was very important. Right in the middle of COVID, livestock farmers were stuck in their community. They couldn't get some of the veterinary services that were usually in the cities. The community community health workers who were in their communities and who had downloaded the app were able to provide simple diagnostic in the community. Now, let me take you through how the Farm Aid was able to work for livestock farmers. So the Farm Aid platform started by registering farmers. To register farmers, they used IVR, which is they used IVR to share the information, but to get farmers onboarded, they reached out to farmers via the radio stations, via live meetings live meetings in the farms, and field engagement with the farmers. And then they got the farm sizes, their locations, their crops, simple things that help them profile the farmers and understand what specific information they can provide to these farmers. After engaging the farmers, they also engaged the service providers and were able to give them good agronomy practices, link them to last mile agents for inputs, mechanization, agriculture, access to finance. There was an interesting example that happened with the access to finance. Here we worked with Standard Microfinance and bundled extension services for farmers who were getting loans within that period. So farmers who got loans within that period also got extension services to see how extension services would improve their ability to loans, because they would experience increased productivity and increased profit. So how did they get this information to farmers? They linked them to by SMS, IVR. IVR is an interactive voice response, and also a call center. What kind of services the farmer get? They got access to inputs, linkages, markets, and also weather information. The weather information came in very handy for them because in this period there was flood, drought, and disoriented patterns of rainfall. So farmers were able to get information on when flooding was going to happen, and they harvested before then. They knew when the droughts were going to occur. And all of this information helped them make real-time decisions for their farming. So moving on to the people who access this information. Over 32,000 farmers were able to access extension information.
Okay, hi, it looks like we've lost Blessing there. So I think we should just move on to mechanization, and then when we get her back, she can conclude her part of the webinar. So Avachi, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. All right, morning, everyone. Okay, so in expanding rural access to mechanization services, there were two things at the core of the problem. The first was, the absence of an effective model for commercial tractor services provision. And this essentially acknowledged the fact that it's economically unviable for the average smallholder farmer to own a tractor. Now, the second key issue was the slow supply of financing for the procurement of tractors, or the procurement of the assets required to expand service delivery. And so the objective for the program then became to create this service provision model, but then to drive the model, we had to increase the stock, or it was necessary to increase the stock of tractors available for service delivery. And increasing the stock of tractors in turn required financing, which brought us back to the issue of financing, which essentially required a guaranteeing organization to provide some form of risk cover to commercial banks in order to stimulate lending. So what we did was first to work with key actors already in the space to create this effective service provision model, and then to demonstrate to the central bank, to the guaranteeing organization, that this was a profitable, viable model built around an economically productive asset that could pay itself or repay a loan within a short period of time. And so by partnering with three associations or service providers, as we call them, TOAN, TOFAN, and NECAS, we've been able to see the model come alive. We've seen it generate transformative change in the space, with over 180,000 farmers benefiting from routine access to mechanization services. In terms of investment, we've seen about 4.5 billion naira coming from commercial banks guaranteed by NERSL. We've also seen strong catalytic effects in the market. So we've seen the market respond tremendously to these changes with new private sector partners, private sector operators crowding into the space. We have new service providers and then complementary actors like ICT companies providing all sorts of services. We've also seen the confidence of the guaranteeing organization grow. So we've gone from not believing to offering a risk cover of about 10% to 50%, and now, you know, institutionalizing this 75% credit risk guarantee with interest drawback. Nevertheless, challenges persist. Even with this, you know, dynamism in the space, we're still seeing key challenges, as of course is typical to any value chain. And the key one is the fact that the stock of tractors just remains grossly insufficient. It's insufficient to scale service delivery and to deepen the penetration of mechanization in the country. I think the statistic says we have give or take 7 tractors per 100 square kilometers. Now, to put that in context for you, the global average is about 500 tractors. And this tractor insufficiency essentially is driven by the fact that you know, the bank financing has not grown as quick as we thought it would. It has not flown as smoothly as we thought it would, even with the presence of a guarantee. And at the moment, the understanding is that's because of, you know, a lack of cohesion in the process for accessing the guarantee. Further on from that is the fact that we're seeing alternative financing, yes, for example, vendor financing, but even that is growing very slowly. And this is because, you know, for small quantities of tractors, you know, vendors are happy to offer higher purchase agreements, but for anything over 10%, we go back to the issue of requiring some form of risk cover. Now, the second key issue that I would like to highlight is that of asset underutilization. And that essentially just alludes to the fact that, you know, even where tractors exist, they are not being maximally utilized because that link between demand and supply is still weak or, you know, tenuous at best. So it's these 2 key issues that we sought to resolve, leveraging technology, the issue of financing to increase the stock of tractors, and then the optimizing the utilization of existing assets. So to do this, we worked with TOFAN. TOFAN is the Tractor Owners and Hiring Facilities Association of Nigeria. They're a service provider. And we worked with them first to test the viability of the proposition at a web-based level. The proposition essentially being that, you know, technology can somehow be brought to bear on increasing financing and then optimizing asset utilization. So we addressed the financing issue through crowdfunding. So essentially, you know, through a debt or equity capital from collective sources. And the crowdfunding was able to bring low-cost funding into the space, and, you know, it helped to overcome some of the key issues of traditional financing, such as access to credit risk guarantees. Access to credit risk guarantees. Now, for the asset utilization issue, we approach this in a myriad of ways. The first was crowdsourcing. So crowdsourcing is essentially sourcing idle tractors from the crowd. That's basically what it means. And it means mopping up idle assets across the country to increase the stock of tractors available, of course, and then through digital demand aggregation. So we're able to aggregate demand via web, via mobile, via USSD, and of course, still working with those on-ground agents who go into the communities to the last mile and aggregate demand. And the benefit of this was it was able to then facilitate better demand planning and fleet management for the service providers. The platform offers other benefits. It allows actors crowd into the space. You can act as a booking agent, a tractor operator, a mechanic, and, you know, what have you. The platform allows us to map the farmer's land, which helps with precise billing, because if you know the exact size of the land, then you're able to, you know, offer a specific fee. And then finally, the platform allows asset tracking. So for those who own or have invested in tractors, you're able to track, you know, the productivity of your asset via the platform. So this essentially gave birth to the track platform. So this is what the platform looks like. It's like I said, it's available via web, via mobile, and via USSD. So let's look at a demo, and we'll be spotlighting crowdfunding, which is one of the core value propositions of the platform. It's available at TrackTrack, www.tracktrack.co. When you go to the website, this is what it looks like. You can click on Get Started. It'll show you the various services on offer. As we are spotlighting crowdfunding, you're able to click on Invest Now. And then that will take you to a page or a form which shows you the various options for investment you have. It tells you the number of units per tractor you can invest in. So each tractor costs about 12 to 18 million naira, and it's broken down into units of 500,000. So you can indicate the number of units you want to invest in. It will return, the total value of your investment, the tenure, and the interest rate applicable. You can select the brand of tractor you would like to invest in if you have that technical knowledge, and then you fill in your personal details. Indicate the type of investor that you are, and then finally you're able to post any questions, comments, inquiries, and click submit. Now this form goes to the back end where there are agents on hand to then reach out to you and take the conversation forward. And like I said, the platform also has a dashboard where you're able to track your assets. Now, since the rollout of this scaled up version of the platform since October 2020, we've seen good traction. So there's interest to crowdfund 64 tractors. We've been able to mop up about 330 idle tractors across the space, and that represents about, give or take, 400 additional tractors, are available to expand service delivery. We have 5 equipment vendors also providing new tractors to be crowdfunded via the platform. There are about 14 service providers who are able to then, key into this, expand their tractor fleet, as well as tap into that mass demand that has been digitally aggregated. There are 430 new agents also onboarded onto the platform who are able to expand access for farmers in their location. And finally, we have about 6,800 farmers using the platform to access mechanization services. In the next 2 years, Tofan expects to be able to crowdfund 600 tractors, mop up 5,000 idle tractors, and of course have about 200,000 farmers routinely using the platform to access services in addition to other key targets. Now, I would like to leave you with some key takeaways, with some lessons that we've learned in trying to do this work. And the first is that we believe that we can categorically say that ICT can drive access. It can drive access to information, it can drive access to extension, to inputs, to mechanization services, the gamut of what is needed. Not only can it drive sustained access, but we believe that it can help attain universal coverage. But the important question remains, who pays? And by who pays, we mean who provides that catalytic investment required to scale these platforms to the point where they are generating the exponential benefits that they are capable of returning. And so in this instance, it's not yet about profit, it's about strengthening the foundation that has been built for a solution that can generate, that can solve these social problems. For us at Propcom, what we've done is put our resources behind laying the foundation. What we believe is that other organizations can then put their resources into building on this foundation rather than reinventing the wheel. The second key lesson is that the NGO and INGO community certainly can leverage on these platforms for the information for the work that they do, as well as to complement their own on-site extension work. A third key issue is that of policy, and essentially, creating an enabling environment to allow these technologies to thrive. I mean, at the moment, we have 2 key market entry barriers. The first is to extension services, where the Nigerian Communications Commission now requires agri-tech companies to obtain licenses to operate any form of digital agricultural extension platform. For crowdfunding, there's this SEC rule that requires any platform whatsoever, be it agri-tech or otherwise, to have a 100 million naira capital base situated with the SEC just to be able to offer crowdfunding. And so, these are things that will necessarily constrain investment in the space and constrain our ability to use these platforms to expand access. So the point here is that attaining scale is possible via technology, but there needs to be an enabling environment. And finally, we would like to highlight the importance of irrigation as sort of the tie that binds all of this together. You know, irrigation is, the more we become irrigated, you know, the higher the utility of our tractors, the shorter the payback period on loans, and, you know, ultimately the higher the increase in land yield and the productivity of our farmers. So irrigation is key. It drives everything else. Irrigation drives increased production. It drives increased demand for extension services, for inputs, for mechanization services. And so it's all tied to our ability to pursue and achieve irrigated agriculture. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining us and hand over back to Yvonne to take your questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much for that presentation, Aveti, and thank you to Blessing as well. I'm wondering if we should give Blessing a few minutes to come back and conclude her part of the webinar. Blessing, do you want to just come and conclude since you had technical difficulties when you were presenting?
Okay, I could just take my last slide where I shared the results for extension. Thank you, Yvonne. Just for a minute.
Bear with me while I. Okay, I think this is.
Yes, thank you very much, Yvonne. So I was just wrapping up here and saying that this is a typical example of how extension services can be delivered to farmers right in the middle of a pandemic. So in 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic, we were able to get, in partnership with the AgTech company, over 32,000 farmers registered to receive all of these extension services. And they got it because we also worked with the AgTech company to onboard about 300 plus service providers, the input companies, the banks, the mechanization companies, and all the kind of services that farmers need to have extension. And then the app, the VetWiz app, was downloaded by about 293 animal health workers. Of course, that number has gotten to thousands right now. But right in the middle of the pandemic, over 293 animal health workers had the apps on their phone, and each animal health workers can reach about 250 to 300 farmers in their community. So Extension has the opportunity to reach out to support farmers to increase their productivity. And ICT is the right platform to minimize all of the barriers that come with the geography, pandemic, and also the gender barriers. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yvonne.
All right. Nice one, Blessing. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Ovo as well for starting us off. I'm wondering, Ovo, do you have any last minute takes, something you want to add to the conversation before we move to the question and answer session?
Oh yes, just a few last words by way of summary. Aveti did a great summary on what we've done. I think it'd be good to just highlight a few things. It's not been all rosy, but what we found is that radio in every houses and basic feature phones, you know, in the hands of people is an important leverage that we could use to sustainably drive extension services. I think the biggest limitation perhaps is connectivity. As you would have noticed, we are here in Abuja and even getting basic internet is a problem. Nonetheless, it's a sector that continues to grow. And as the market increases, there is a higher capacity driven by competition to improve, you know, the quality of the services that, you know, internet-based or GSM-based companies are offering. And we see this as a future or as the future for extension and optimizing services, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid, you know, who are people that typically smallholders, widely dispersed with a high logistics cost, and overcoming that logistics cost requires, you know, leveraging technology. I think the other thing that technology has allowed us, basic use of radio and feature phones, is the complementary role and the efficiency gains, you know, and this will continue to grow as market actors continue to connect. a good example from the COVID period was the fact that radio stations had, key contacts for mechanization service providers in the communities. So when there was the lockdown and people couldn't move anywhere, the local radios, farmers continued to call those local radios, and they were able to respond, to the needs of the farmers. And the Farm Aid platform also, because it had the key local players, the last mile agents, they had the fertilizer rural promoters on their platforms. In those communities, they had the spray service providers offering agrochemical services. They had vaccinators, community vaccinators on their platform. And so when a farmer uses their calling lines, they're able to tell them who the nearest, who the nearest supplier or service provider is to them. And that sort of increased the efficiency. Just to flag that the work we've done with the Farm Aid platform actually started in 2019. And part of what we wanted to understand was what it would cost to get, extension services to the farmers, as well as defining what the viable market is. In other words, who are the users and who are the payers of the service? Blessing didn't have a chance to speak a little about this, but we have been able to establish that it will cost about 1,500 Naira to reach a farmer with extension services in a year, in 1 year period. And depending on the number of production cycle the farmer is able to engage in, that is an unparalleled efficiency, spending 1,500 to get the type of information tailored for your particular need, connects you to latest technology in production, the right type of seeds to use, where to find a tractor supplier or service provider, what market or who is looking for your commodities to buy. I think the last point I would like to make here is the fact that, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. With the high efficiency that we see in the sector, development partners like us could just leverage and build on top of the systems that we're living off, which is really looking at some of the persisting or prevailing bottlenecks. And I've already highlighted a number of those. The issue around unlocking the bottlenecks in accessing some of the licenses for ag tech companies in order to be more efficient, and crowdfunding platforms. And I think that, with proper targeting of resources within the development space, we could continue to build on some of the successes we've made so far. We would like to entertain questions now, so I'll hand back on to Yvonne. Yvonne, do you want to take the questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ogo. We have a few questions that have come in. So I will read them out and have the speakers take a shot at addressing them. So now, forgive me if I don't pronounce your name accurately. We have Mr. Kuni saying, how are you targeting women beneficiaries? What is the benefit of Propcom Mai-karfi? And will you be expanding into other locations, other states? And are you open to new partnerships with women cooperatives, for example? So that's a lot. So I'm going to take it one at a time. The first one is, how is Propcom Mai-karfi targeting women farmers? Blessing, Abati, do you guys want, or would you want to take that?
Okay, let me start with how we're targeting women farmers. We've done this in two ways. One, targeting women-specific value chains, where you have more women participating in and understanding the key constraints they have in accessing information. The other way we've done this is to, get the partners to look at direct engagement of women. So really creating that incentive system that allows a business make the extra effort and the extra investment to reach women in an efficient and effective way. So for radio, as we know, one of the things we did was to use research to help the radio station see where women play in the space and what women's specific needs are as at the time. For Farm Aid platform, what Farm Aid had done is to specifically target women, to onboard women on the platform, because we already found out that in the Northeast, women are disproportionately affected, disconnected from information. So they specifically targeted women. The other point on whether we are extending, the good thing about the work we've done is we've worked with key actors in the space. So you have Farm Aid platform led by Farm Innovation, a commercial entity, and they're available, I think they're here in this meeting. They're available to engage with any organization that is interested in building on top of what they have, or leveraging what it is that they have there. Same with the radio stations. What we see a future where radio stations get this type of collaboration that helps them consolidate and build a capacity in key areas that they need to sustainably create products and services that is interesting for sponsors, as well as interesting for the farmers meeting a particular need. On whether we are here, for much longer, unfortunately not. This is the last year of the program implementation, but like I mentioned, we've already established systems working with actors that have the incentive and the capacity to respond to these problems in a lasting way. So you can, we have contacts, we can connect you to these organizations, private sector-led organizations that are doing it, for profit and other social motivations.
Right. Thank you so much, Ovo, and I hope that is satisfactory. But if you have a follow-up question, can you just let us know? Now to the next question. Patrick is asking, and this is directed at Blessing, how was the feedback session and the polls done during the radio program? Was it through call-ins?
Okay, so there were two ways to get, they used to get feedback. One is a Uliza app, U-L-I-Z-A. It's a toll-free number where farmers call and get the information. So if you saw the slide that was shared, that there was a woman sitting down, collecting the information from farmers and filling in yes, no, and the responses for those. So it was running, those were being run live simultaneously with the phone calls that farmers were calling in for free.
Okay,
so is there a follow-up question?
Thank you, Blessing. I don't know, I'm sure if there is, he will post it. All right, to the next one. David is asking, how do you ensure sustainability of the radio program?
So the design of the radio program was always to make it sustainable. So from the beginning, we never invested in paying for airtime for the for the agricultural radio program. What we did was that we helped the radio stations to see that they can make money from radio, agricultural radio, and we supported them to tailor their program in a way that they began to get sponsorship by themselves. So the program was running before we came. So they will always have agricultural radio, and the program will run even after we stop working with them. However, it will run better. There will be more sponsors, it will be more effective, and it will be better targeted at farmers.
Perfect. Don't go away, because the next question is also for you. It says, are farmers able to pay for your ICT solution, and how?
So we have, okay, so I'll answer the question directly. A small percentage of farmers are paying for the ICT one. That's the one on the mobile phone. With as low as 200 Naira, they can subscribe for extension services for a month. So between 200 Naira for 1 month, 500 for three to 6 months, and then 1.5 for the entire year. So they pay their, we have the ad tech companies here. They have vendors in agro dealers shops across various communities. You could do it via USD. It means that you send a short code that removes the funds and then transfers the code to you to register. So yes, there farmers can pay. Small percentage of farmers are actually paying. And then we've been able to highlight some of the big things that make farmers pay. One, they want access to market, direct linkages to market. Two, they want weather information. In northern Nigeria, they need to know when it is going to rain. They need to know when the floods are coming. So they are willing to pay for this kind of information. Three, they want access to inputs because of displacement, services are things they cannot easily find where to get this input. So they will pay for where to get direct access to inputs. Four, they need access to finance. They want to know that where they could get loans easily. And so when they pay for these services, they get all of these linkages via the extension services. So they're willing to pay.
Perfect. Thank you, Blessing. Perfect. Thank you. So we have another question from Julian. Julian, and this question is for Arvati. Julian is asking, are agri mechanization companies, that is importers and assemblers, still partnering with state governments who provide subsidized tractors, or has it stopped?
The short answer is no, it hasn't stopped, but we have seen it reduce drastically. Now, one of the interesting things about the way that we work, of course, is, working with private sector actors to improve value chains. But as we identify opportunities for advocacy or policy influencing. And one of the key ones was this issue of, partnering a lot with state governments to buy tractors, because we found, of course, like, most people know that was creating a distortionary effect on the market, in the sense that, while the intention was noble, it never ever generated the desired effects. The tractors were never able to be offered at a subsidized rate for services provision. So what we've seen in recent times is a movement away from that practice and a focus more on, a private sector-led approach to providing tractors and to providing tractor services. So in recent time, we've seen programs like the AEHE and, the Green Imperative Program, all private sector facing, and less, less promotion of government direct procurement, except in, say, Bauchi state, for example. In most recent times, I believe Bauchi, if I'm correct, is the only state that has recently purchased tractors, and that was done with the aim to partner with some private sector service providers who would then manage these assets and use them to provide services to farmers. So, like I said, the short answer is no. Is yes, it's still happening, but at a very reduced rate or a very reduced occurrence.
All right, perfect. Hang in there. Don't go. Don't worry. There's a follow-up question from Gillian. Have you done? And again, Ovo, please, you can chime in here as well. It's asking, have you done any benefit cost analysis of the work that we're doing, our extension and mechanization work, I guess? And then there's an example, says, for an example, the use of radio, what benefits on a family farm versus cost of putting on the radio program? So just basically, have we done any benefit cost analysis on our work in AgMech and extension services?
Okay, I could start on the cost benefits analysis that we've done. For mechanization, the scope of what we've done on cost benefit of using mechanization compared to other type of, land preparation, animal drawn type of services has shown like 45% higher benefits, both on the productivity, the yield per hectare, the cost efficiency in terms of how much you would have spent on labor, manual labor, animal drawn, compared to using a tractor, as well as the use of other type of, mechanized services or application of other types of inputs that you require when you use a tractor. So we have that fact and that figure. It's almost 50%, higher returns, as well as reduced drudgery, especially for women and young people. And as the migration, from rural to urban areas continue to increase in those locations, older farmers are having less and less, human resource to help them deliver on that. So for that, it's very obvious, it's over 40%, between 45 to 50%, depending on the location. For the use of radio compared to, other services that you will get, there's a higher in the northern part of Nigeria. You don't have any, very solid evidence to show that this is the more value you get. But what we know is that majority of households in the north use radio. We have research that have shown that they take action and rely on the information they get on radio, as well as, what they get from their peers. And their peers, in turn, depend on what they hear on radio to take action. So part of what we plan to do as we round off towards the end of August, September, is to really look at, the cost benefits of, leveraging radio. The efficiency would definitely be high compared to an on-site extension agent who they barely see. But we still need to do that analysis, and in subsequent months, we hope to do that when we would have had at least 5 seasons of running this program to be able to categorically say that, this is how much difference there is to leveraging radio and feature-based information sharing as compared to all other channels of information, including, some social networks that people have relied on from time past on this. Yvonne.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Ogo. We don't have a lot of time left, so I will please beg the indulgences of the speakers to keep your questions short and your answers short, rather. I have a question here from Aaron Isaac, and he says that with funding challenges and low literacy, what would Propcom suggest as a way out to get a much larger crowd? I guess getting more people to key into some of these services that we've talked about in the presentation. Blessing,
okay,
Aveti.
Maybe before Aveti or Blessing speaks, there's maybe one key information we didn't highlight here is the fact that the radio programs are heard in their local languages, and the messages they even get from the Farm Aid platform is, dependent on the language they speak in their locality. So language is not a barrier, literacy is not a barrier. The profiling of the farmers on the Farm Aid platform allows them, tailor messaging in a way that is communicated clearly to the farmers. Blessing, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I think it's fine. I think he's talking about funding also. How would they continue to get funding? So I think that the radio stations would just continue to practice profiling the investors, the possible investors, profiling them and engaging them to sponsor their programs.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ogo, thank you, Blessing. All right, we have, have a question from somebody here that says, how did ICT help farmers in assessing other mechanization technologies like planters, harvesters, irrigation equipment, threshers, harvesters, etc.? This question is from an anonymous person. So Aveti, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, I think I like this question because I think it sort of alludes to or highlights the potential that the platform actually has. So while at the moment, the focus is very much on tractors, given the high capital investment required, there are also other implements that are available to be crowdfunded or to be accessed via the platform through ICT. But like I said, I like the question because it shows us just the potential that the platform has to, offer access to the gamut of mechanization, from land preparation to storage to harvesting to logistics, all of it. So I do think this also highlights one of my concluding points of the need for us to build on this existing foundation, and for other organizations to perhaps consider providing the catalytic investment required to scale up this sort of platforms that can then offer us access to everything. I think that's it. Thank you.
Right, perfect. Thank you. Right. So David and Cooney want contacts for our radio partners, so I guess we will have to get back to them. Aaron has another question. What more can be done to scale up mechanization in Nigeria beyond the bottlenecks that you've identified, Aveti, especially with the focus centered on leveraging ICT? Aveti?
I would say, these are two of the key issues, but there's a lot that can be done. There is, like I said, expanding, the types of technologies on offer, not just, this high capital or high capital equipment, but also smaller productive assets. There's, there's always room to create more awareness, especially at the rural level, so that there's higher adoption of, mechanization services. there's always room for, creating policy or taking a holistic approach to policy development for the mechanization sector, not only focusing on perhaps tractors or focusing on irrigation, but looking at the entire value chain from land development all the way to irrigation. So there are several ways that there are several opportunities or levers that can be manipulated to improve access to mechanization in the country. But at the moment, we believe that the two most pressing key issues are increasing the stock of tractors for commercial services provision and optimizing the use of the assets that we already have on ground. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Right, so I think this will be the last question we'll take, because we're at the 12 p.m. mark. Moses would like to know a few things. One, he says, how did you decide the reach of the radio program? And how do you quantify the number of people reached, especially those adopting the teachings? Blessing, this one is right on your table.
So before Blessing jumps in, there's an independent monitoring system of radio program reach. And so we rely on this third party to give us listenership information, on across all the radio stations that we work with, particularly focusing on programs. And then part of what we did was to do a validation through a baseline. And by the time changes have happened, we did a random review of the same through, data gathering, as well as leveraging the LISA platform to see what proportion of farmers, from the lab cohorts have really heard or taken action based on the content of those radio programs. So Blessing, is there anything else you guys did?
I think your answer is perfect. That was it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Obo. Thank you, Blessing. I think I'm going to squeeze one more question in before we call it a day. Olufemi is asking if there is an ICT app that's been created to assess and analyze output yield on crops for smallholder farmers, especially those in Propcom Mai-karfi target states. Any takers?
Sorry, I was off for a bit. What was the question?
Right, I'll repeat the question. Is there an, Olufemi wants to know if there's an ICT app created to assess and analyze output yield on crops, especially in our target location.
So there are a few independent and, apps that look at, even though predictions. For instance, we've worked with the Rice Advice app in the past. It's an open source technique, and the Farm Aid platform also, it's in form of an app. There's a number of apps that are really out there. It's just the current fragmented nature, and what the Farm Aid platform has done is sort of pull everything together through the input of the soil structure and soil fertility and the particular crop in a location. You can impute those data and it will generate what type of input you need to use to be able to attain a certain level of productivity or a certain level of yield in those locations. So there exists quite a number of them. At least the Rice Advice app, you can very well use that. There are a few that have been developed by a number of startups in Nigeria, and the Farm Aid platform has that capacity to do that, as well as provide all other connected needs to actors upstream and downstream. Yeah.
Right, thank you. I think we should call it today because we've gone past our 12 p.m. mark. I want to first of all say thank you to everyone who participated in this webinar today, and to say that should you want more information, you can send an email to info@propcommaikarfi.org. That's info@propcommaikarfi.org. And yes, we will be sending out the recording and slides for this webinar in the next 24 hours or so. So yes, so I want to thank you again and bid you a good day. Thank you to our speakers, and until the next webinar, if you haven't registered, please go to our website to register. I will put the link in the chat box as well. Thank you.